Hi everyone, welcome back. If you have a teaching interview coming up in Canada and you are wondering what kind of questions you should prepare for, this video is for you. Today, I'm going to go through 10 common teacher interview questions, but I'm not just going to give you a list of questions. We will also talk about what the interviewer is actually looking for when they ask these questions, how you can structure your answer, and I'll share some sample answers as well. But before we start, there is one really important thing I want you to remember. During an interview, try not to give only a one line or very direct answer. It's too direct. Yes, I differentiate instruction based on students' need. It may be correct, but it doesn't show what you actually do. Instead, briefly explain your approach, then support it with a real example when the question allows it. Technically, there is nothing wrong with that answer. Think about it from the interviewer's perspective. What did they actually learn about you as a teacher from that answer? I think not very much. Instead, explain your approach and whenever possible, connect it with something you have actually done in your classroom. You can talk about the situation, what you did, why you chose that strategy, and what happened afterward. And please don't memorize the sample answers I'm sharing today word for word. Use them to understand how you can structure your answer and then connect them with your own teaching experience. That's going to make your answer sound much more natural. And now let's start with our first question. Tell us about yourself and your teaching experience. This is probably one of the most basic questions, and there is a good chance you will hear some version of it in an interview. But don't start telling them your entire life story. You need to keep it professional, not your life story. Remember, they already have your resume. What they are looking for here is a quick understanding of who you are professionally as a teacher. So you can briefly talk about your relevant teaching experience, the grades, the subjects you have taught, one or two of your strategies, your strength, and then connect that experience with the position you're applying for. For example, I'm a certified teacher with experience working with students in different learning environments. One of my strengths is building relationships with students and adapting my instruction based on their different learning needs. Through my experience, I have learned how important it is to create a classroom where students feel supported and comfortable participating. I'm now looking forward to bringing that experience to a collaborative school community and continuing to grow as an educator. So, in this, we are simply using a simple structure: experience, the strength, and the teaching approach and connection to the role. And please make sure and remember this. Don't memorize this word for word. Use the structure and replace the example with your own classroom experience. Try to make it natural, perfect, and generic. Second question is, why do you want to work for our school or school board? Now, this is one question where I really don't recommend having one generic answer that you use for every interview. Before your interview, spend some time researching the school or school board. Look at their website. Look at their priorities, their values, programs, the communities they serve, and anything else that's relevant to the position. Then find something that genuinely connects with you. For example, before the interview, I spent some time learning about your school and the community you serve. I really connected with your focus on creating a supportive learning environment and helping every student succeed. That aligns with the way I approach teaching as well. I also value collaboration, so I would be excited to work with your team, contribute my experience, and continue growing as an educator. Again, don't copy this answer for every school. Your answer should change depending on where you are interviewing. Think, what did I learn about this school or board? Why does it connect with me? And what can I contribute? Third question is, how do you handle challenging behavior in your classroom? This is an important one. The interviewer isn't simply asking, can you control your students? They want to understand your approach to classroom management. Can you build relationship? Can you set clear expectations? Can you stay calm when something happens? And can you try to understand what's behind a student's behavior rather than immediately jumping to consequences? They want to learn calm, consistency, relationship, and a good judgment. You need to stay calm and keep everyone safe. So, this is our goal. And what could be the answer? I believe classroom management starts with building positive relationships and setting clear expectations. For example, I had a student who often avoided independent work. Instead of assuming it was simply a behavior issue, I checked in with the student privately and realized that the work felt overwhelming. I started breaking the task into smaller, manageable steps and checking in regularly. Over the time, the student became more comfortable with the work and participated more independently. Did you notice what happened in that answer? I didn't just say, I have good classroom management. I actually showed the interviewer what I did. So that's the difference. Reminding you, use the structure and replace the example with your own classroom experience. So the fourth question is, how do you differentiate instruction for diverse learners? This is another question where giving a classroom example can make your answer much stronger. Find out where students are starting. Use flexible groups and scaffolds. Provide visual, manipulative, or technology. Adjust supports using ongoing assessment. For example, during a math unit, I noticed that some students were ready to work independently while others needed additional support, so I used flexible grouping and worked with a small group using manipulative and visual examples to help them understand the concept. I also used quick exit tickets to check their understanding and adjusted the groups as needed. This allowed me to provide extra support without holding back students who were ready to move ahead. So the simple structure is need and the support, checking progress and adjusting it. And I also want to point something out here. Differentiation doesn't necessarily mean you're creating a completely different lessons for every student in your classroom. It can be about changing the support, grouping resources, level of scaffolding, or way students access the learnings. So don't just list strategies in your interview. Try to show how you actually use those strategies to respond to your students' need. The fifth question is, how do you assess student learning and use assessment to guide instruction? For this question, don't simply say, I use diagnostic, formative, and summative assessment. Those terms are important, but the interviewer also wants to know, what do you actually do with the information you collect? Checking the prior knowledge, using the observation, conversation, and the student work. Giving descriptive feedback, reteach, or adjust instruction when needed. You have to keep your answer very focused. Don't only name assessment types, explain what you do with the information. For example, I use assessment throughout the learning process, not just at the end. I use different strategies such as observation, student work, questioning, and exit tickets to check students' understanding. For example, if an exit ticket shows that several students have misunderstood a concept, I adjust my next lesson, reteach the concept in a different way, or provide small group support. This helps me make sure I'm responding to what my student actually need. And the simple structure is collecting the evidence, noticing the patterns, and adjusting the teaching. And now, if you're watching this and thinking, how am I supposed to remember all of these answers during my interview? You don't have to. And actually, I don't recommend memorizing them. Instead, before your interview, sit down and think about 5 or 6 strong experiences from your teaching career. Maybe you supported a struggling student. Maybe you dealt with challenging behavior. Maybe you differentiated a lesson. Maybe you communicated with the concerned parents. Maybe you collaborated with another teacher. Those same experiences can often be adapted to answer several different interview questions. So prepare your stories, not just your answer. And let's continue. So the sixth question is, how do you create an inclusive and welcoming classroom? When answering this question, don't only say, I treat all of my students equally. Students have different strengths, backgrounds, experiences, and learning needs. So think about what inclusion actually looks like in your classroom. You could say, I try to create a classroom where every student feel welcome, respected, and comfortable participating. I also understand that students have different learning needs, so I provide different ways for them to engage with the lesson and demonstrate their learning. For example, some students have benefit from visual supports, extra time, small group instructions, or different ways to complete a task. My goal is to make sure every student has a meaningful opportunity to participate and succeed. What could be the simple structure in this? Belongings, access, participation, and the reflection. Notice that you are not only using words like inclusive classroom. We are giving actual example of what that looks like. Seventh question is, tell us about a time you supported a student who was struggling. And now, this question is almost asking you directly for a story. So give them one. Identifying the specific need, choosing a targeted support, collaborate when appropriate, monitoring progress, and adjusting. For example, I had a student who was struggling to complete independent tasks. I noticed that the student would often become overwhelmed when given a larger task. So I started breaking the work into smaller, manageable steps and checking in more frequently. I also collaborated with support staff to make sure we are using consistent strategies. Over time, the student became more confident and was able to complete more of the work independently. So, what kind of structure we are using here? We are using the situation, and we are also using the support and the progress and the reflection. And again, please do not memorize this word for word. Use the structure and replace the example with your own classroom experience. And you know what? This shows several things at once. You identified the problem, you changed your approach, you collaborated with others, and you monitored whether your strategy was actually helping the student. That's much stronger than simply saying, I provide extra support to students who are struggling. Question number 8. How would you communicate with a parent or guardian who is concerned? Remember that teaching is not only about communicating with students. You also need to build professional relationships with families. If a parent is concerned or upset, your first reaction shouldn't be to become defensive. Listen first. Listen without becoming defensive. Share specific observation or evidence. Agree on practical next steps. Follow up after the conversation. Showing the professionalism, listening, and focusing on the solution. What could be the answer? I would first listen carefully to understand the parent's concern and make sure they feel heard. Then I would share specific classroom observations and examples of the students' work to give them a clear picture of what I'm seeing at school. From there, we could discuss possible strategies and agree on some next steps together. I would also make sure to follow up with the family to discuss the student's progress and make any adjustments if needed. So, the simple structure we are using it, we are listening, providing the evidence, planning it, and following up. Next question is, how do you build positive relationships with your students? For me, this is such an important part of teaching. But building relationships doesn't mean becoming your student's friend. It means creating trust, knowing your students, communicate and listen and be consistent. Creating trust, respecting and connection while still maintaining professional boundaries and clear expectations. For example, I believe positive relationships are the foundations of a successful classroom. I make an effort to get to know my students, listen to them, recognize their effort, and stay consistent with expectations. For example, I had a quiet student who rarely participated. So I started with short individual check ins and smaller opportunities to contribute. Gradually, the student became more comfortable participating in class. What structure we are using? Knowing them, listening, being consistent, encouraging, and building trust. So, this is like something as simple as learning about students' interest, greeting them, checking in with them, listening to them, and recognizing their progress can make a big difference. Students are much more likely to engage when they feel that their teacher knows them and respects them. Last but not the least, tell us about a time you collaborated with colleagues to support student success. Teaching is not an isolated job. You're going to work with other teachers, educational assistants, supporting staff, administrators, families, sometimes other professionals. So the interviewer wants to know whether you can work effectively as part of a team. So, what are they really looking for? Describing the student need or challenge, explain who you collaborated with, show the shared strategies, explain the impact on the students. So, keep your answer focused on schools want teachers who can work as part of a team. Example, I had a student who needed some additional support. So I worked closely with the support staff and other teachers to understand what strategies were working best for the student. We agreed to use consistent expectations and support across the classroom. We also checked in regularly to discuss the students' progress and make changes when needed. Over time, having that consistency helped the students feel more comfortable and become more successful in the classroom. We're using the simple structure here: challenge, collaboration, sharing actions, and impact. And the important thing here is not simply saying, I'm a team player. Show them a situation where you actually collaborated with someone and explain how that collaboration helped the students. And a very important question, this is a bonus question. Do you have any question for us? Try not to say no. Ask a thoughtful question instead. Whatever question comes into your mind, just go for it. What supports are available for new teachers? What are some of the school's current priorities? What does collaboration among staff look like here? So, those are 10 teacher interview questions that I would recommend preparing before your next teaching interview. But if there is one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's this: don't memorize 10 perfect answers. Instead, prepare 5 or 6 strong stories from your own teaching experience. Think about a classroom management challenge, a student you supported, a time you differentiated your instruction, a conversation with a family, a time you collaborated with your colleagues, or even a lesson that didn't go exactly as planned and what you learned from it. Your real experiences are what will help your answers sound natural and show the interviewer who you actually are as a teacher. And remember, interview questions can vary depending on the province, school boards, school, grade level, and positions. So always research the school and the role before your interview. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to save it and share it with someone who might need it. And make sure you subscribe because I share lots of information about teaching in Canada, from teacher certification and licensing to job opportunities, interview preparation, and much more. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck with your interview, and I'll see you in my next video.